Hello and a warm welcome. I say a warm welcome because, firstly, it is a warm welcome, and secondly, because it's pretty cold today. Now, this is being recorded quite a long time in advance for various reasons, and by the time this thought for the day goes live, you may have all the windows open or you're sitting in the garden and enjoying a well-earned cuppa, and perhaps even out and about in early spring sunshine. Or you could have a garden full of snow. Who knows? But I'd like to stay briefly this afternoon with a slightly wintry theme. We're trying to reflect on Lent in these thoughts for the day in these few weeks. And we have, for part of it, been following the poems of Catherine Charnley. And today we're going to be looking at a poem by a poet we've looked at before, R.S. Thomas, who was a priest and ministered for many years in rural and later coastal Wales. Thomas is fascinated by what the Lenten journey might look at for us today and locates his theme really in a Welsh winter landscape. The landscape of deep Wales, beyond the coastal resorts, beyond the big cities and the stadiums. Deep Wales. And it's shot through with images that are very similar to the images that we think of when we hear about Jesus' temptation in the wilderness, but are slightly different. It invites us to look both at temptation and also, wonderfully, at the end, at glory. So in our mind's eye, let's go to a barn, a typical barn farm in winter. Thomas imagines a person, possibly symbolic of Jesus, possibly Jesus himself, in a desolate barn, in the wilderness of the winter of deep Wales. And visions come to his mind as he sits. Where he sits is an uncomfortable place, a derelict place, even dilapidated, certainly a wilderness, a Lent place. And as the journey parallels the journey of Christ, temptations are not only resisted, but sometimes there is a situation where the suffering of Lent, the denial of Lent, the lostness of Lent is actively embraced because it's something that helps us if we go through it. It's like opening the door on a winter's day and rushing out into the snow. It's like people when they've been in a sauna, they rush out into the snow immediately afterwards and jump in the nearest lake. It's an active embracing of things that are uncomfortable. And for all that we try to sentimentalize Lent, the Lenten journey, being a journey with Christ, takes us into areas where there is ice and frost, and it is uncomfortable. And that may be what I are feeling at this moment. And somehow getting that inside us and understanding it and embracing it as part of the path is both deep, challenging, and ultimately can be a pointer to glory. Thomas speaks of the situation where the person in the barn is given a vision very similar to the temptation that Christ faced to make stones into bread. A vision of a white loaf, a perfect loaf set out on the snow, but passes through that. God comforts us, but sometimes we are comforted rather like this little robin here, with the little bit of bread that helps us to travel through the Lenten time. Journeying with Christ, whenever it is difficult, is also a journey in the presence of the Good Shepherd, who sets a table for us at our most difficult times, and who longs to feed his flock. Not just with the small crumbs, but ultimately with the greatest crumb of all, the loaf that is Christ's body, symbolically in the Eucharist. As we journey, we seek to allow God to feed us. Listen to this passage, a little known passage, I think, in most churches, from the first book of Kings in chapter 19. This is part of the story of Elijah, parts of which we know very well, others less well. This is Elijah travelling into the wilderness himself. He also experiences new life and support in the wilderness. 2 Kings 19. But he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness, and came and sat down under a solitary broom tree. He asked that he might die. It is enough now, O Lord. Take away my life, for I'm no better than my ancestors. Then he lay down under the broom tree and fell asleep. Suddenly, an angel touched him and said to him, Get up and eat. He looked, and there at his head was a cake, baked on hot stones, and a jar of water. He ate and drank, and lay down again. The angel of the Lord came a second time, touched him, and said, Get up and eat, otherwise the journey will be too much for you. He got up and ate and drank. Then he went in the strength of that food for 40 days and 40 nights to Horeb, the mount of God. Lent is understanding that the ice is part of who we are, whilst at the same time God feeds us for the journey. May we be touched by angels this Lent. And may we pray for an awareness of the love of Christ within us. Let's hear the poem. Bread. Hunger was loneliness, betrayed by the pitiless candour of the stars' talk. In an old byre, he prayed not for food. To pray was to know, waking from a dark dream, to find the white loaf on the white snow. Not for warmth. Warmth brought the rain's blurring of the essential point of ice, probing his raw pain. He prayed for love. Love that would share his rags' secret. Rising, he broke like sun, crumbling the gold air. The live bread for the starved folk. Lord, may we pray for love. May you give us this bread always.